The Mazda RX-8 is one of those cars which was curiously missing from GT Sport. It's an ever popular vehicle, and I still remember playing Gran Turismo 3 and seeing that very first Mazda RX-8 concept, and then as it evolved along with Gran Turismo, it's almost like certain cars such as the RX-8, these cars that we can easily take for granted now as modern icons really, but we witnessed them become a thing. When the RX-7 was the king, the RX-8 came along, totally different approach, this four-door coupe. I mean, these days everyone seems to be doing that kind of thing, but at the time Mazda was kind of the first, even before Mercedes did with the CLS. And then, curiously, for the first time in a very long time, GT Sport comes along and has no RX-8s, which is very, very curious, especially for polyphony. They do tend to favour the Japanese stuff, so to not have it in the game was very curious. Then GT7 comes along though, and not only does the RX-8 return, technically it debuts, because this example, a 2012 shape RX-8 Spirit R, the end of the line for the RX-8, is technically the first time we've ever had this model in the series, which I think is a perfect way of bringing it back. It's one of a couple of cars like this in the game wherein they were not included before, but now that they have been, I think it's a most welcome addition, because a lot of us, myself included, do really like that final look that the RX-8 had. Of course, over time it got quicker, more powerful, and as a slight aside, in real life, RX-8s are, at least here in the UK, ridiculously cheap. You get so much performance and such a fun car for the money, and a fairly practical one too, but of course the main concern that people have is the reliability and the maintenance on a rotary engine. Now, I would love to review one of those in Beards and Cars, and doubtless I will at some point in future, but for now in the game, not only is it great to have it back, but just like its forebear, the RX-7, just like the MX-5, it is a very, very good platform. Don't be fooled by the fact that it has the four doors, the four seats, that it's a bit more practicality oriented and a bit more spacious. This is still a sports car first, a family car second. Ironically, very similar to my own car. The Quattroporte is a GT, an exotic first, and then a four-door luxury limo second. One of the misconceptions people tend to have going into it. The RX-8 doesn't tend to suffer from that as much though, because it does look like much more of a pretty, pure sports car design. Now, in terms of the stock spec, of course being a rotary engine, it's not particularly large, it's a twin rotor, although you can 787B swap this thing and turn it into an absolute beast, but even if you don't do that, you can quite comfortably get this thing up around 700 points and even use it as a cash cow. Now, for example, that one, in my form when I tuned it, was running about 430 horsepower at the 700 point level, with the weight around 1100 kilos, racing hards, full aero. That's a pretty healthy overall spec to work with, and as I've said numerous times on the channel, the beauty of rotaries is that their performance goes way beyond the raw spec. You know, even standard, 230, 250, 270 horsepower, what they can do with that power feels very much like an electric car, or like a gas turbine car, wherein it feels more like a 320, 350, 380 horsepower kind of punch in terms of performance. Now, just like something like a Toyota high-performance engine or a Honda high-performance engine, like a VTEC, you do have to work them pretty hard, motorcycle style. Very high revving, they do all their best work in the high RPM, and of course the torque doesn't tend to be the best thing about them, although a turbo does definitely help with that. In terms of this one though, well, actually it does feel a little bit thumpier than something like an RX-7. The RX-7 feels very much like what it is, a pure Japanese sports car, kind of like Japan's modern Jaggy type, or an XK almost. It's this fun, pretty, high-speed flow from corner to corner kind of machine with, of course, a healthy dose of drifting. The RX-8 feels much more adept in kind of the hot hatch territory, throwing it around tighter corners, which is interesting given that it is a larger and heavier car, but it really doesn't feel it. And the reason why it doesn't feel it is because it still is not that heavy. 1,350 kilos, that's only 20 kilos more than, for example, the Ferrari F8 Tributo, which I reviewed recently. Again, pretty good for a four-seater. Now, in terms of the standard points, it sits at 482. so modest. I'd say that's about what you'd assume, given that it has 230 horsepower standard, and completely unsurprisingly for a Japanese car, it's not really that expensive, given that you can buy it from the regular Mazda dealership. The older stuff like Skylines and some of the older legendary cars of course have gone crazy on price. This one, not so much. It's $32,000. With that 787B engine swap though, which of course you have to unlock, you're looking at 690 horsepower without doing anything to it, around 1,000 when you do. So you really can turn this thing into like a Mad Mike I should say even, style drift build. I guess you could do a Mad Max build if you wanted to, but a Mad Mike style drifter or a track day monster, you could easily build like a time attack Tsukuba kind of machine. It's a very, very versatile platform, and for me personally, as much as I love the RX-7, in practice, in real life, although I'm yet to drive either of them, I could very well see myself liking the RX-8 more. It does give me that kind of vibe because it is so different. We can, as I mentioned earlier on, take this kind of platform for granted now, but at the time, pretty much no one else was doing a car quite like the RX-8. And if they were, they certainly weren't doing it as well as Mazda did. So ultimately, that's it for my thoughts on the RX-8. It's fantastic to have it back, but also a great touch to make it one which we technically haven't ever had before. It certainly makes it not be a duplicate in that kind of form. But give me your thoughts. Do you love the RX-8? Are you not so much of a fan? Are you more of an RX-7 kind of person maybe? And of course, stick around for more reviews and tunes here on the channel as well. But for now, as always, thanks for watching.